Today we're recapping a 2005 film called Revolver. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. After spending 7 years in prison, gambler Jake Green is finally released. 2 years later, Jake and his brother Billy visit a prominent local casino to recover money owed to them by the owner, crime boss Dorothy Macha. Despite warnings from his bodyguard Paul, Macha lets Jake join his private game. As they head up, Jake hesitates to take the elevator due to his claustrophobia, but the bodyguards remind him about the 20-floor climb, so he reluctantly takes the elevator while battling a panic attack. Jake's first bet, a chipped toast against another player, is deliberately lost to deceive Macha. When Jake repeats the same bet with Macha, he wins, and he and Billy leave the casino with large bags of cash. On their way out, Zach stops them and warns that they are in danger, offering his help and giving Jake his card. Jake decides to take the stairs this time but collapses, falling as the card reads, "Take the elevator." As Jake is rushed to the hospital, Macha expresses his concerns to Paul, suspecting that Jake is seeking greater revenge after 7 years in prison, especially after the incident involving Jake's sister-in-law. Macha orders Paul to hire the best hitman to eliminate Jake at the hospital. Jake is told that no cause for the blackout was found and should rest while awaiting blood test results. Billy goes back to his house while Jake hires bodyguards for protection, but they're all killed upon arrival. Jake survives by narrowly dodging a bullet when he notices a card on the floor that reads, "Pick this up," and bends down to grab it, attempting to escape in his car. Jake's driver is also shot, but Jake rescues him just in time. The hitman is confused by his failure and suspects someone tipped Jake off about Macha. However, Sort blames his bad feeling for the miss. Meanwhile, Zach takes Jake to meet his partner I, who mysteriously holds Jake's medical file. The results reveal Jake has a rare blood disease that will kill him within 3 days. Zach and A offer Jake protection in exchange for 2 non-negotiable terms. Jake must hand over all his money and follow their instructions, including answering any questions they ask. They give him 3 hours to decide, but Jake leaves, suspicious of a trick. After receiving the same diagnosis from the hospital, Jake remains doubtful and seeks a second opinion from his private doctor, who confirms the same prognosis. Realizing there's no other option, Jake withdraws money from the bank and agrees to A and Zach's terms. While they drive, A explains that he and Zach are loan sharks using Jake's money for their operations. During their first visit, A asks Jake about his past with Macha. Macha had hired 3 foolish men known as the 3 Eddies, who lost their card player before an important game, and enlisted Jake, an expert player and a threat to his brother Billy's family. During the game, other players insulted Jake and his mother, provoking him into starting a gunfight. Amid the chaos, the lights went out, the money disappeared, and Jake found himself questioned by the police after someone dropped his name to keep him quiet. Macha's man threatened his niece, resulting in his sister-in-law's accidental death when she tried to protect her daughter. Jake stayed silent about Macha's involvement and served 7 years in prison. During this time, the Eddies angered Macha, leading to their brutal end. After a series of client visits, Zach sends Jake to a motel. Meanwhile, Macha and Paul try to meet crime kingpin Sam Gold, who is considered the top figure in the criminal world. However, since Gold never meets anyone directly, they deal with his advisor, Lily Walker, who agrees to broker a powder deal with Macha, warning him that Gold dislikes publicity and doesn't offer second chances. Later, Jake hands over more money to Zach and A, and recounts his prison experience while playing chess with A. Faced with 2 sentencing options, 14 years in general population or 7 years in solitary confinement, Jake chooses solitary. His cell was between 2 men, a chess master and a con man who, although never speaking, were aware of each other's every move. Over the first 5 years, the 3 communicated by writing messages in library books, and that's how Jake learned their strategy to win any game. The 2 men planned an escape and promised to take Jake along, but when they finally left, they disappeared without a trace, taking all of Jake's money and leaving a note that read, "You can only get smarter by playing a smarter opponent." Jake began using this formula to win at casinos and build wealth. As days pass, Jake continues working for Zach and A, visiting clients and giving away his money, even though he's tasked with threatening those who don't play. Jake struggles to intimidate innocent, desperate people. Meanwhile, A and Zach steal a safe containing the powder Macha had promised Lily by chaining a wall to a truck and pulling it down. When Macha discovers the theft, he orders Paul to fix the issue at any cost. Later, Jake receives a call from Billy, who warns him that Zach and A are so dangerous even Sam Gold avoids them. Urging Jake to get out, Jake ignores the warning and continues working. When asked to shoot a frightened client, he refuses and instead attempts to shoot A, only to find the gun is empty before A knocks him out. Jake wakes up hours later at the motel and gets a call from A, telling him he survived the third day and should see a doctor. After visits from his niece and Billy, who leaves him a gun for protection, Jake visits his doctor, who confirms the initial diagnosis was wrong and Jake is healthy. Jake tries to reach A for answers, but A simply tells him to be patient. Meanwhile, Paul investigates and Jake's name has surfaced as being involved in all the recent troubles affecting Matcha's operations. Matcha orders Paul to eliminate Jake. When Jake returns to the motel, A and Zach warn him that Matcha's thugs are waiting inside. Jake flees and Matcha's men pursue him, but Jake manages to evade them. Especially after one thug accidentally shoots himself, the remaining criminals find the body and mistakenly believe Jake is responsible. Jake meets A and Zach at their office when they reveal they always knew Jake wasn't truthful about his past with the Eddies. After Jake's release from prison, the three Eddies were waiting to kill him, blaming him for their firing by Matcha. To save himself, Jake struck a deal. He'd pay the Eddies 3% of any money they lent him. Initially, only one Eddie accepted, but after Jake honored his promise, all of them joined in, this time demanding 4%. Jake, however, was actually paying each Eddie with money from another Eddie, effectively losing nothing. Eventually, the Eddies ran out of money and borrowed from Matcha, who grew curious about their mysterious benefactor. After using the formula to win at gambling, Jake took a vacation with his brother and niece, during which Matcha killed the Eddies for failing to repay him. Meanwhile, Matcha dines at a fancy restaurant when his henchmen inform him of Jake's escape. Sorter recognizes John's lover disguised as a waitress, shoots her, and chases her driver. Still off his game, Sorter only wants her, and before dying, the woman manages to shoot off one of Matcha's fingers. In the chaos, Sorter is sent to Lord John's hideout to eliminate him and his men. Back with Jake, he continues talking with Zach and A while they play golf on the rooftop. They reveal that no one ever sees Sam Gold because he doesn't really exist. Gold is merely a representation of ego and greed, exerting power only over those who believe in him. They advise Jake to change what he allows to control him. After their conversation, Jake withdraws the rest of his money and donates it all before sneaking into Matcha's bedroom. Struggling against the voices in his head that represent his ego, Jake apologizes to Matcha for tricking him out of his money, acknowledges Matcha as the superior crime lord, and mentions he made a donation in Matcha's name before leaving to confront his fears. Jake takes the elevator, which gets stuck on the 13th floor. As he fights off a panic attack, he has an internal dialogue rejecting his ego, finally stepping out of the game as a free man. When the elevator resumes, Jake reaches the ground floor and finds Matcha waiting for him with a gun. Driven to madness by his own ego, Jake, now at peace, calmly walks past him, leaving Matcha bewildered by Jake's lack of fear. The next morning, Paul brings Matcha the local newspaper which all feature Matcha's name, confirming that Jake had indeed made the donation in his name, causing everyone to think the casino owner cares about the community. Initially pleased with the new, positive image, Matcha's happiness is short-lived as Paul informs him that Jake has the powder and has been playing them all along. Paul, Sorter, and Matcha's other henchmen visit Billy, who manages to hide his daughter in a cupboard after realizing one of his bodyguards betrayed him. When found, the henchman tortures Billy, refusing to believe he doesn't know Jake's whereabouts, or where the powder is hidden. As Paul's methods escalate, Sorter becomes increasingly uncomfortable, especially when the girl is forced out of the cupboard after her sobbing gives her away. Rejecting his own ego, Sorter methodically kills his fellow henchman to protect the child but makes a fatal mistake, and is killed in the process. Meanwhile, Lily visits Matcha, delivering a warning sent by Gold, who disapproves of Matcha's newfound publicity. Lily also informs Matcha that his time is up and he won't receive a second chance, sending him into another panic. A and Zach take Jake and the powder to Matcha's casino, where A finally beats Jake at a game of chess while revealing the final pieces of the story. A and Zach were the men in the cells next to Jake's imprisonment and always intended to help him escape, but Jake wasn't ready to accept the truth, implying they may have been mere figments of his imagination. Before Jake can fully process this, the casino's bodyguards escort him to Matcha, who has Jake's niece with him. Jake drops the bags of powder on the floor and reassures his niece that everything will be fine, infuriating Matcha, who can't comprehend Jake's continued lack of fear, even with a gun pointing at a child. Overwhelmed by humiliation, the voices in Matcha's head decide that Jake can't hurt a dead man, leading Matcha to put the gun to his own head and pull the trigger, and that's how the movie ends.